going, Brian?
So far, so good today.
You guys had what was it? How many shows did you have last week? Was it one or two for kicks?
One last week and two the previous weekend.
Yeah. So how's that been coming back off of just COVID and having not being able to play for like a year?
It's crazy because, when everything first shut down, uh, it was weird at first because, it's all of a sudden everything just stopped and I was at home. And then after about a year of that, and like shows started appearing on the horizon, I was almost
Yeah.
like dreading going back out again because I was so comfortable being home. But
Yeah.
then things just sort of jump back into gear, and you know once we started up again, it was like we never stopped until we got this past September, and we ran into some problems. A few of us ended up with COVID, and then
Yeah, I'd seen that.
yeah, and then Jimmy ended up, having a heart attack, which was
Yeah, I know.
crazy. So that sort of shut things down there for about another month.
Yes, yeah.
Uh, but now it's back up and running again. So
Yeah. I had seen at the beginning of the pandemic, you guys did like a drive-in show, right?
yeah, well, let me think. When was that? Oh, it was kind of like everything shut down in like mid March,
Yeah.
and then in 2020, and then that drive-in show. When was that? That wasn't until the following November. So.
So what was that like? Because I've never seen anything like that. That must have been odd to see, just a line of cars.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Except that really, what they did was, there all those cars out there, but everybody sort of got out of their car and they were just standing in their little areas. So
Oh, okay.
there were still people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that initial show was in November 2020, and it was freezing cold. I remember, and then we had the second show. We did another show there in, was it April of 2021. And that was sort of the kickoff to this whole past year. And that one we thought, oh yeah, it'll be nice and warm by then. and that show was even colder than the first one, so that
Oh,
was
wow.
kind of rough.
Yeah. I was lucky enough. I caught you guys at the M3 Fest in Maryland. So how's it doing that to just kind of, that is that whole festival, the whole Friday. It's your show. Like it's the kicks off show. How does it feel to have that all based around you guys?
It's it's cool. I mean, yeah, when we started doing when they first started the M3, it was just on Saturday, and then we were getting such a good response from the crowd that they decided to expand it and make Friday night like our headlining night. Um, it's a little bit of pressure, but it's our hometown crowd, so it's pretty natural.
Yeah. All right, so I want to take you back all the way to the beginning. So kicks are at that point. The shoes started off. It was Ronnie and Donnie. How did you meet? Who'd you meet first, Ronnie or Donnie?
I met Ronnie. Well, I knew Ronnie.
Oh, you
We
know.
Yeah, we both played in bands around, so I knew, I'd met him before. I had gone to a few of his shows, and Donnie I didn't know at that time, but I'd seen him in his previous band too. So yeah, Ronnie was the one that approached me about joining the band.
And so this started off as it was then you three, or did you have Steve and Jimmy also around at the same time?
No, it was us three and a different drummer. We had this guy named Donnie Spence who was the original drummer. So it started with just four of us, and initially to start, and Donnie already had some songs together. So between him and the drummer, they would sing the songs. But we also, in those early days, we were a cover band too, because you couldn't book a show as an original band, especially
Yeah.
starting out. So we also did covers, but we soon after forming, after the first few rehearsals, we ended up reaching out and getting a singer. We went through three singers before we found Steve.
Oh, I didn't
So
know that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy
And
didn't
so then, yep.
Jimmy didn't come along until after we got Steve.
Oh, okay. And so then in 81, I was like 4 years after you guys started, you got signed to Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Was that the moment that you guys felt like you made it, like at first when you guys got that signature down?
Well, yes, of course. Yeah, and that's the weird thing about that whole process is, it does feel like, getting signed to Atlantic and, growing up, all the records that I had and seeing that Atlantic label and then finally being on that label, it feels like you finally made it. But then you soon realize that you're just, you were a big fish in a little pond, like for us around
Yeah.
Baltimore playing because we were popular around that area. And then once get this record deal, now you become this little fish in this huge pond.
Yeah.
Well, it's like kind of like starting over, really.
Yeah, definitely. So what was in 85 you guys released Midnight Dynamite, and that had it was definitely the most successful album up to that point, but it didn't crack, top 10.
Mhm.
And so what was the thought process going in like 87 to record Blow My Fuse? Were you guys aiming for that to be the one? Like this is gonna be the one that explodes?
Well, it's funny because we went through a lot of different management uh, situations throughout the years, and right before Blow My Fuse, we signed with this guy Mark Puma, who also had Twisted Sister. Who did he have? Zebra. Um, he had a few people, but anyway, so I think signing with a new management and it just sort of things just ended up lining up at that point because before that it was sort of our timing was always a little off, and I think that's why nothing ever happened. And the funny thing is every time we would do a record, our A&R guy from the label would come down when we were doing final mixes, and he'd always crack this joke. Well, we took it as a joke. I don't know if he was being serious, but he'd go, all right, boys, you can order your Ferraris, and it was like we'd all look at each other and go, yeah, right, because we were sort of cynical by that point. We didn't think, we just figured I don't know. We just tried not to get I guess we tried not to get our expectations up too high so we wouldn't be disappointed.
Yeah. And so then I'm not sure how this works, but in was it 89 you guys were on tour with Tesla and Great White, or was that later? And you were told that the record is done. So a company can do that. They just stopped putting money into it.
Oh yeah, that's the way they work. They sort of push it for a little bit, and then they figure, well, it's not going to go any further than this, and then they just sort of cut you off and tell you to start thinking about the next record. Yeah, and so at that point in 1989, we had already we did the Rat tour, we did White Snake tour, we did a short little Bad Company tour.
Yeah.
We had gone to Japan. So all these things had happened during that time period. So by the time we got to the Tesla Great White tour, it was kind of near the end of that cycle, and that's when the record company said, okay, after this, you got to start, working on the new songs and thinking about the next record.
And that was before they had released, or you guys released Don't Close Your Eyes as a single.
Yeah, yeah, they weren't even thinking, they didn't even consider that at that point.
Wow.
And we didn't really even think about it either, which was crazy. I mean, we were doing the song live, but I guess because we were such a high energy band live that we didn't think about releasing a ballad.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you've heard the story that Great White's manager Alan Niven heard us doing that song every night, and he finally he asked us, well, how come Atlantic never released that song? And we were like, well, I don't know. and and I remember the one show. There was a show we did out in at Irvine Meadows out in Orange County, California. Um, and our Mark Puma was there, our manager, and Alan Niven was there. And after we got done that show, he approached our manager and he goes, why haven't hasn't Atlantic released that single? And Mark Puma, told him, well, they've told us to start working on the next record. And he goes, well, they'd be crazy not to release that. Do you mind? And he goes, do you mind if I go talk to them? And Mark Puma goes, be my guest. And at the time, he had Great White, but he also had Guns N' Roses. So Alan Niven was
Yeah.
kind of a big shot at that point. So he called Atlantic and talked to him, and you know, like a week or two later, they were releasing that song. They took his advice.
Yeah, and so that really skyrocketed things. That led to it was your first tour of Japan.
Uh, I think we went before that was even released. I
Oh, you had
think.
gone before.
I can't. My timeline is a little sketchy now.
Yeah,
The older I get, and so much time has gone by, you start to forget the order of things sometimes.
yeah. And so then after that, it was Hotwire in '91, I
Hmm.
believe,
Yeah.
and then it was '93. You began writing with Eric Stacy of Faster Pussycat.
Yeah, because the the reason I started doing that after Blow My Fuse, that got us to a whole new level, and so when we started working on Hotwire, at least for me, my hopes were high. I mean, I thought,
Yeah,
you know, Blow My Fuse did that, this is going to be even bigger,
yeah,
and that didn't happen. So I was so disillusioned. And the whole grunge thing started, so I could see everything was starting to just go, like we had peaked and we were starting to go back down. And I was like, oh man. And at that point, I'd been playing in the band for 19 years and I just needed a change at that point because I couldn't bear the thought of going back down, through what we'd already come up through.
yeah.
So I reached out. Here's the funny thing, though. Initially I was reaching out to Tammy Downs, and somehow Eric got on the phone. He intercepted the call, so I ended up working with Eric instead of Tammy. But
So there was never any thought of maybe I can balance kicks and rhythm slaves. It was just I'm going all into.
yeah, I started taking trips out. It was actually a secret at first. I didn't tell anybody. I started making trips out to California with all my frequent flyer miles, and
Yeah,
put this other band together with Eric, and we did this 4-song demo, and it was March of '93. And I just remember when I heard that demo, even though nothing ever came of it, um, but when I heard it, it was like, this is what I want to do. It was a total change from KIX, and it was this whole fresh thing for me, and I just felt like I needed that change, so that's when I finally told the band I was leaving. And yeah, there was no way I could have done it because the whole
yeah.
rhythm
It's
thing was
other
west.
sides.
Yeah, so I just moved there.
Yeah. And then in '94, you were on the Show Business album, and you did a couple shows with Kicks. Was that was just all it was? There was no if like there was no I might come back and do this. It was just I'll do a couple shows, I'll do the album, but that's it.
Yeah, basically that's where I was coming from. I don't know, maybe they thought I'd changed my mind. But I was basically a hired musician for that last record, and it actually worked out well because not being in the band, I think I was treated with more respect, especially from by Donnie, who was the main songwriter,
Yeah.
and, and I got paid this lump sum of money that I would never have seen if I was in the band.
Oh
So
yeah.
that worked out, and then they invited me to do. It was 3 shows altogether. I did. I came back in the fall and did 3 shows, and I think maybe they were hoping that would spark my, you know, cause me to want to come back. But I agreed to the 3 shows, and then that was it for me. it was, yeah, I had no interest in coming back.
All right. And then from there it was Rhino Bucket. So what was that like joining a band, not starting a new one, joining a band that was already established, and then you came in and joined that machine? How was that?
Well, actually, at that point when I joined Rhino Bucket, they had sort of broken up
Yeah.
um, in '95, so they hadn't been playing. And while I was playing in bands, because after Rhythm Slaves, I went through a bunch of different things out there, and
Yeah.
one of them was this blues band I was playing in, and Reeve from Rhino Bucket just happened to be the bass player. So him and I, we became friends, and then we sort of moved from project to project together, and and then at some point in the late '90s, George showed up in the picture, and we started messing around with songs, but it wasn't Rhino Bucket yet. Um, and then that sort of fell apart because I had to go away. I had to go away to jail and rehab for about a year and a half. So after I got through all that,
Yeah.
um, at one point George calls me up, and uh, Ricky Rackman was trying to resurrect the Cat House out there, and he'd gotten Junkyard to play, and he wanted Rhino Bucket, and so George goes. George asked me if I would do it because the original guitar player didn't want to do it. So I agreed, and it's right up my alley. It was so
Yeah.
I learned all the old songs for this one gig, and then once we did that, we got an offer for a movie soundtrack for this movie called Rolling Kansas. So we were able to work on like new stuff together, and that just sort of, at first I was doing it just to help him out and get through the Cat House gig, but once I knew the songs and then we started working on new songs, uh, the next thing I knew I was in the band.
I mean, yeah, I guess it all works out. And then in '03, that was when Kix, well, Kix and Mark Schenker, then he came into the play. That
Yeah.
became a thing. Was that supposed to be, this is what's going to happen for the rest of our lives, or was that just going to be, we'll do a couple shows because why not? And then it turned into just 17, 18 years later we're here.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, when we first did that, Steve had called me up and kind of threw it out there, and we decided. Yeah, it was the holidays around the holidays in 2003, and I think we had like 3 shows or something. And we thought, yeah, let's put this thing together and just do a few shows and make a little money and have fun. So that's all it was going to be. And then those shows were so successful that we decided to book another group of shows the following September, and then we just kept doing it like that for a year or two after. And I mean, every time we played, it was sold out. So it was like it just kept coming. And
Yeah.
then eventually, I reached out to I talked to Steve. I said, because Steve was the shows were so successful that we kept booking more shows, and Steve was trying to handle the bookings, and it was just a lot for him to handle. So I offered to sort of look for a booking agent. So I stumbled onto Sullivan Big, who is, he's been our agent this whole time,
Yeah.
and from there things expanded outward, and we ended up, now we're playing all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did not have plans to do it this long, but it just happened.
Yeah. Is it difficult doing, because you still do shows with Rhino Bucket too? You guys had been, it was either Asia or Europe a couple of years ago. Is it difficult balancing that and kicks?
It is because at first KIX only played twice a year, like little groups of shows. So there was a lot of other time between where I could go out with Rhino Bucket, and the more KIX took off, the less time I could put towards Rhino Bucket. So that's why those European tours are kind of condensed. Like we'll go over there for like 4 to 6 sometimes 8 weeks at a time, and just do like a just nonstop, just night after night after night.
Yeah.
Um, but we have to sort of squeeze it into like January, February, like the months where Kix isn't playing a whole lot. Um, these last 4 years, uh, Rhino Bucket was on a kind of like on a break. We sort of George decided to just call it quits there for a minute, but I knew he'd get bored and come back.
Yeah.
So now this year we're starting back up again. We did the Monsters on the Mountain. We did another private party like a week or so after, and now we're going to Europe again in January, and then we come straight back and jump on the Monsters of Rock cruise with Kix. So
Yeah, I will also be on that boat. I'll see you there. So is that going to be, because you guys did Monsters on the Mountain and Kix also did Monsters on the Mountain.
yeah.
What's that like doing two very just different shows in the same, span of time in front of the same people?
Well, luckily, well for that the Monsters on the Mountain, it was 2 different days, which works. I mean, that's the same with the boat. We'll alternate. It's like
Yeah.
Kix will play and then Rhino Bucket and then Kix and then Rhino Bucket. That I can handle, but early on, I remember trying to do like open for Kix with Rhino Bucket. That was like, I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, it wasn't so much the physical part of it. It was more the mental part of it. It was just
Yeah.
so mentally draining to try to do 2 different bands on the same show.
Yeah, I saw like Leonard Skinner, and one of their guitarists was also the opening act. It was like his band, and I was thinking like that guy's crazy. I don't know how you can do like 3 hours straight, like somehow flip from your music to Leonard Skinner. That's crazy to be able to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. It's insanity.
yeah. So when did the thought of writing new music with Kix come up? Because it was 2014 Rock Your Face Off came out. That was 11 years after you guys got back together. So how long had you guys been kind of, oh, we'll get to it? Like, when did you guys first start talking about new material?
Well, for the longest time, we still had those big gaps in our schedule. So I was doing Rhino Bucket, and Steve still had Funny Money going for a while, and then and Ronnie has his band, the Blues Vultures. So we all had our own individual things that we could sort of use as our creative outlet. So we didn't. It was almost like I think. Well, me personally, I was kind of worried about trying to do a record without Donnie because Donnie was the primary songwriter.
Yeah.
And I think we all had that, you know, that hesitation about it. We didn't know if we could pull it off, and we didn't want to just throw something out there that sucked. So uh, it took a long time to sort of build up to it, and there were a couple things that happened along the way that sort of pushed us in that direction. And the main thing was that live DVD we put out,
Yeah.
KIX Live. We went with this label. What was it called? Oh, Frontiers from Italy. A lot of like '80s bands are on that label. So we were looking for some way to distribute that video. So Mark Schenker took it upon himself to approach Frontiers, and so they agreed to distribute it, but they had us agree to a studio album in order to do that. So we pretty much signed with that label first. They put the DVD out, and we started working on songs, and while we were doing that, there was this problem with the DVD where they hadn't cleared all the licensing for it, and they had to pull it off the shelves again, back off the shelf. So that at that point we weren't really happy with them, and we had stumbled onto Loud and Proud Records, which was a much better idea because it was an American label, and we knew the CEO, and so because Frontiers messed up that deal with the live DVD, it enabled us to have that loophole to get out of our contract, and we ended up going with Loud and Proud. and that whole thing just sort of fell together. Like the more we worked on the songs, the more we realized, oh, maybe we can do this. And then once we got Taylor Rhodes involved, it all came together.
All right, so I want to finish off by asking you, how would you describe KIX's sound? Because I think it's remained pretty consistent over the years. I saw you guys at M3, and I heard that was the first time I heard "Love Me with Your Top Down," and I thought that was out of the '80s, and I was shocked to see that that came off of the new record. So I think like when you listen to KIX, you know, like pretty much straight away it's KIX. So how would you describe that sound?
Uh, well, it's funny because, God, how do you describe that sound? It's weird because we're not really like I don't think we sound like all the other '80s bands.
No,
We've
not at all.
Yeah, we have a lot of '70s influences for sure. Because we all we all came up through the '70s, and we were already playing when Van Halen came out, and I think most of the '80s stuff, especially the West Coast, is influenced by Van Halen, especially the guitar players. You know, they have the finger taps and all that fast stuff, and
Yeah.
and Ronnie and I, we're like '70s guys, and so we're more, it's like Aerosmith, the Stones, Cheap Trick, and especially AC/DC for the energy. So that's kind of our combination sound right there. Um, there's other influences too, but those are like the main ones. So I think that's the way I would describe it. We sort of came along before the fact, before that whole '80s explosion. You know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you for talking to me today. I'll see you, I guess, a bunch over the next year. I'm seeing you guys in Jersey at the Debonair Music Hall, on the cruise, hopefully at M3. I don't see how you wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk today.
Yeah, but hopefully everything goes well and we'll just continue this thing.
For sure. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.